In this presentation, I'm going to discuss some of the upcoming changes to the AgWRAP regional application process for agricultural water supply ponds and ag pond repairs. I will discuss some of the rationale for why we are changing the process, discuss the changes that are being made, share details on the new process, and provide an example of the suggested workflow for completing the process. Finally, I will provide you with the timeline and pertinent deadlines for completing the application process for this year. Why are we changing the process? There are several factors that led us to review the process and make some changes. First, there's been a lot of confusion regarding the whole regional application process. And this is on both sides, technical services staff and district staff. The timeline for submitting documentation and requesting technical assistance hasn't been clear. The type of documentation required to submit an application is not clear. There has been confusion on whether a preliminary design was needed before an application can be submitted. So there's just a lot of confusion surrounding the entire process, from site assessments to requesting technical assistance to submitting the application. Second, there have been some questionable projects initiated in the past. Projects where the cooperator may not necessarily have a clear objective, or where the cooperator may not have a well-defined need, or the identified resource concern was questionable. There have been projects that the district is not necessarily fond of, but they still feel the need to submit an application. And then there are often questions regarding whether a pond will actually be used for its intended purpose. And then, somewhat related to the previous concern, there is a high rate of cancellations of AgWRAP pond projects, both new ponds and pond repairs. Contracts get initiated, and then for one reason or another they are canceled. I feel like a lot of this can be attributed to the cooperator not being fully aware of the program policies, whether it's the operation and maintenance requirements, required design standards, or the amount of funding received. Either way, the rate of cancellations for these practices is much higher than most others. And finally, we are changing the process to help reduce the workload on tech services staff. As of right now, AgWRAP projects account for nearly half of all the projects that tech services staff is working on, with a majority of these projects being pond and pond repair projects. Whether it be site assessments, pond designs, or soil evaluations, this workload is taking up a bulk of their time. With the amount of time and effort required for these projects, we want to ensure that the tech services staff are working on projects that are viable and show high potential for being a good project. The way that we intend to address some of these concerns is to change the current process up a bit and provide you with some tools that will help guide you through the conservation planning and documentation process. The new process will require district staff to work through some initial conservation planning prior to receiving technical assistance. After completing a set of required documents and evaluating the project at the local level, district staff will submit the conservation planning documentation to the division for preliminary ranking. We feel that the information captured through initial conservation planning will provide a very good indication of the viability and quality of a project, both to the local district staff as well as the division staff. After the division staff reviews the projects, the top-ranking projects will be forwarded to technical services staff. Technical assistance for completing soils evaluations and site assessments will only be provided to those projects that rank highest based on the documentation that was submitted. A soil scientist will complete a soil evaluation, and an engineer will complete a site assessment to determine the suitability of the site. If the project is deemed feasible by the tech services staff, a regional application can be submitted. The application will be ranked, and the highest ranked projects will be funded. The conservation planning and documentation we are asking for is not intended to be an added workload. The required information is fairly minimal and basic. We are not asking you to complete an entire NRCS CPA 52 form to the RMS level with all environmental concerns identified and documented. Just a simple inventory and evaluation of the planning area with a couple maps indicating site location and soils. This is basic information that should be documented on nearly every conservation planning project that you work on. And the forms that we created should provide you with a better, more succinct format for capturing much of this information all in one place. We are hopeful that these changes will streamline the process and prevent further complications. We also hope that the changes will provide you with the opportunity to better prioritize projects at the local level. In addition to the major changes in the application process, we've put together several new forms to assist you with conservation planning and documentation. The new forms that we created include the aforementioned inventory and evaluation forms, a cooperator acknowledgement form, and a standardized operation and maintenance plan for AgWRAP ponds. The inventory and evaluation forms were developed as planning aids to help conservationists record pertinent information during the conservation planning process. They should be used to identify resource concerns, document the cooperator's objectives and goals, and inventory existing resources and management practices that are present in the planning area. The cooperator acknowledgement form outlines the AgWRAP policies as they pertain to ponds and pond repairs. This form gives you the opportunity to review the policies, including funding limits, with the cooperator early in the planning process to make sure that they are aware of the requirements and limitations involved with the program. The operation and maintenance plan for AgWRAP ponds provides standardized guidelines on the routine operation and maintenance of agricultural water supply or reused ponds. The plan is applicable to both newly constructed ponds and ponds that have been repaired or retrofitted. It is suggested that this plan be shared with an interested cooperator early in the planning process so that they are aware of the operation and maintenance required for the entire 10-year lifespan of the contract. In addition to these new forms, we also revamped several existing forms, including the site assessment forms for new ag ponds and pond repair retrofits, as well as the regional application forms for new ponds and pond repairs and retrofits. Lastly, we reconfigured the AgWRAP water balance tool to make it more user-friendly with more useful outputs. All of these new forms and tools are available on the AgWRAP regional application website. Please look them over and let me know if you have any questions. At this point, I would like to go into a little more detail regarding the new regional application process and present a suggested workflow for completing the process. The order in which some of the individual items are completed could be flexible, but the overall gist should be the same. Let's say the process starts with a farmer contacting the local soil and water conservation district. Through the initial conversations, it becomes apparent that they are interested in installing a new agricultural pond. You schedule a site visit to evaluate the site and talk with the farmer in more detail. In these initial stages of conservation planning, you should identify resource concerns, determine the cooperator's goals and objectives, and inventory resources and management practices currently present in the planning area. All of this information should be documented using the AgWRAP inventory and evaluation form. You should also create a site location map with aerial photography, contour lines, and the practice location, as well as a separate map showing the soils in the area. With a likely pond site identified and the intended use documented, you should have enough information to evaluate the percent of demand that will be met by the proposed pond using the AgWRAP water balance tool. Now would be the time to evaluate your conservation planning documentation to determine if AgWRAP is the appropriate program to help address the identified resource concerns and meet the cooperator's objectives. First, verify that the practice and its intended use are actually eligible for the program. If it is not, you could direct the cooperator to an alternate program or simply provide technical assistance with no financial assistance to address the concerns. Also, make sure the cooperator is interested in participating in the program and verify the eligibility of the cooperator. If there is a lack of interest or the cooperator is ineligible, again, you could guide them to a different program or provide technical assistance. If the cooperator is interested and eligible, you should complete the AgWRAP Cooperator Acknowledgement Form with the cooperator to ensure that they are aware of the AgWRAP program policies. This would also be the time to share the AgWRAP Pond Operation and Maintenance Plan with the cooperator, so that they are aware of the operation and maintenance activities required for the life of the pond. Once you've completed the inventory and evaluation form, AgWRAP Water Balance Tool, and reviewed the Cooperator Acknowledgement Form with the cooperator, you should review the conservation planning documentation and use the information to evaluate the viability of the project and to rank the project at the district level. This is your opportunity to weed out questionable projects and to provide feedback to the cooperator regarding the ranking and give them realistic expectations based on how the project ranked locally. You could let them know that their project ranked low locally and may not compete well at the state level, and you can provide them with the documented reasonings, whether it's lack of need or questionable objective or the pond will not adequately meet demand. You could also let them know that the project will not be funded or will not be forwarded to the division because it ranked too low locally. If this is the case, again, you can provide technical assistance to the project without financial assistance. However, if it is a good project and ranks high enough according to your local ranking policy, then the project should be submitted to the division for preliminary ranking. Several of the conservation planning documents will need to be sent to the division for ranking. The required documents will include a site map with aerial photography, contour lines, and pond location. The site map should also include the fields that will be irrigated from the pond, if this is applicable. You will also need to include a separate map showing the soils in the area. In addition to the maps, you will need to submit the AgWRAP Inventory and Evaluation Form, the AgWRAP Water Balance Tool results, and the completed AgWRAP Cooperator Acknowledgement Form. Each project will be ranked on the documentation submitted. The ranking score will be based heavily on the information provided in the Inventory and Evaluation Form, as well as the AgWRAP Water Balance results. Projects that address existing needs for cooperators who have a history of agricultural water use will tend to rank higher than those that address expansions and first-time users. Likewise, ponds that meet a higher percentage of the demand will rank higher than those that only meet a small amount of the planned demand, or ponds that grossly exceed the planned demand. After the projects have been ranked, division staff would notify the district of the ranking results. Those projects that scored the highest will be forwarded to the technical services staff for soils evaluations and site assessments. If a project is not among the highest ranking, it will not be eligible for financial assistance through a regional application, but the district can still provide technical assistance. In most cases, the soil scientist will be the first to review the site and perform a soil investigation to evaluate the suitability of the soils in the area. The soil scientist will coordinate with district staff to complete the evaluation. If the site appears to be suitable after the soil investigation, the project will be forwarded to engineering staff to complete a site assessment. The engineers will coordinate with the district to conduct a field visit to evaluate the pond site and complete the site assessment forms. If any concerns are identified through the soil evaluation and site assessment, the technical services staff will schedule a meeting with the district staff and the cooperator to review the special design and construction considerations and how they may affect project costs and impact project implementation. After the recommendations from tech services staff have been made, and if the project is still a go, district staff should complete the conservation plan to include the AgWRAP pond and any associated practices. Upon completion of the conservation plan and map, you should have all the necessary documents and information needed to fill out and submit a regional application. So now that you've seen how this process is going to work, let's add some dates so you have an idea of the time frame and deadlines for this year's regional application period. First of all, the initial conservation planning steps should be completed and required documentation submitted for preliminary ranking by February 1st. Division staff will rank projects and notify districts so that projects can be submitted to the tech services staff by February 11th. Tech services staff will complete soil evaluations and site assessments with final recommendations to the districts by March 22nd. Districts will have until April 18th to complete and submit the regional application. We will rank the applications and present them to the Soil and Water Conservation Commission for consideration at the May Commission meeting. And here are the deadlines again, presented a more streamlined, perhaps easier to follow graphic. The important date for district staff is February 1st. This is the date that the required conservation planning documentation will need to be submitted for preliminary ranking. We hope that this timeline will provide ample time for district staff to gather documentation, division staff to preliminary rank projects, tech services staff to complete site assessments, and for districts to complete and submit regional applications. So to wrap things up, we hope that the new process and forms will provide a standardized and streamlined procedure for both district staff and technical services staff to follow. Having a standard procedure should eliminate a lot of the confusion that currently exists. We also hope that the changes will provide you with the opportunity to weed out questionable projects early in the planning process and to prioritize the best projects at the local level. With district staff prioritizing projects and the division preliminary ranking projects, the workload on tech services staff will be drastically reduced. Tech services staff will only work on the highest ranking projects, which will allow them to be more thorough in their assessments and should reduce the amount of wait time. Another added benefit of the new process is that it will allow staff to focus on their strengths. Conservationists will be able to focus on conservation planning, something they should be comfortable doing and that they do on a regular basis, while technical services staff will focus on completing soil evaluations and site assessments and providing recommendations on the suitability of a site for pond construction or repair. Ultimately, we hope everyone involved sees the benefits from the changes and that the changes will be an improvement upon what currently exists. Having said that, this is the first year we are rolling these changes out. We will not fully know how well the process works until we've gone through it. There are bound to be some hiccups. We just ask that you bear with us and know that we will address these issues as they come up. This process is not set in stone, and we are willing to adjust it in the future if need be. Thanks for watching, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me, or join one of the upcoming question and answer teleconferences planned for the near future. Keep a lookout for those announcements. Thanks.